Hi class, for my lens activity I chose The Tale of the Merchant and His Wife, which was a follow-up to the tale of the ox and donkey. It begins with the donkey trying to reverse its misfortune by attempting to persuade the ox to no longer follow the advice the donkey had previously given. He lies to the ox and tells it that the merchant will butcher it if it pretends to be ill again. In distress, the ox responds by farting and bellowing. The merchant is amused by the absurdity of the scene, and perhaps appreciative of the self-serving creativity of the donkey's lie, and laughs loudly. His insecure and immature wife, however, assumes he just had to be laughing at her, and demands he tell her what he was laughing at. The merchant explains if he tells her, he will die, but his wife doesn't believe him, and says if he doesn't tell her, she will leave him. Her response makes it clear that the merchant's life is so trivial and insignificant in her eyes that she would have him forfeit it simply to satisfy her idle curiosity and vanity. Given the fact that she had such low regard and respect for his life, the reasonable response would have been to tell her she's free to leave, if that's how she feels. Only the most abject of fools would allow themselves to be manipulated into throwing their life away to humor or whim. The rooster is the only one who realizes this, and therefore becomes the chosen voice of instruction. In order to begin to illustrate how to properly handle the situation, the rooster copulates with one of the 50 hens in his brood, and upon finishing, immediately jumps on another. The message is not a subtle one. The rooster is lord over the hens, and does with them as he pleases. Such a belief is reprehensible enough, but the advice the rooster shares next is even more vile. It states, quote, "He should take an oak branch, push her into a room, lock the door, and fall on her with the stick, beating her mercilessly until he breaks her arms and legs, and she cries out, 'I no longer want you to tell me or explain anything.' He should go on beating her until he cures her for life, and she will never oppose him in anything. If he does this, he will live, and live in peace, and there will be no more grief. But he does not know how to manage." End quote. The merchant follows this counsel, with the end result being, quote, "The wife emerged penitent, the husband learned, quote, good management," end quote, and everybody was happy, end quote. Oh, how nice. I do so love a happy ending. This tale was, quite possibly, one of the stupidest stories I've ever read, and I found it to be offensive to all sensibility. I find it difficult to ascribe just one dominant moral. The rooster's advice was delivered in such a matter-of-fact fashion, as if the wisdom of what he espouses should be viewed as obvious and irrefutable. Perhaps the moral, then, should be that young women should be very wary to marry anyone from a Middle Eastern culture where the men have such a debased view of them ingrained so deeply. Another might be the danger of looking for a moral from a silly fable of lies, because the true intended moral was that violence is an essential tool for good management of a difficult woman, and many unfortunately believe that moral to be true. I loathed everything about this tale, in large part because the perspective it advocates is still perpetuated in the world today. It teaches that women are to be controlled through fear and physical force. Although the story was told from a Middle Eastern viewpoint, we see the same basic beliefs put into practice by those in our own society who are labeled bad boys. The question was asked, where does courage come from? Courage comes from an unshakable strength of conviction that a particular action is right, and a willingness to suffer any consequence in order to demonstrate its rightness to others. Courage does not see the numbers of the opposition, because courage's field of vision is occupied solely by principle. Should the entire world gather together and command you to yield your position, courage responds, "I will not move. You move." Courage is based on love of what is right and good. The reason the rooster's advice makes me sick is because there is no love in it. Love has no use for the tools of control. Thus the truism, if you love someone, set them free. The rooster peers through the wrong side of the lens, which inverts everything. So his perspective is informed by cowardice and hate, and fueled by selfish narcissism. Despite that, the rooster is nevertheless held up as the solitary voice of reason and wisdom. For that reason, my overall reflection is that I cannot condemn this insipid, disgusting story strongly enough.